Great radio stations across the land, iHeartRadio, JoePags.com for all the social media. Also, Newsmax TV. Glad to have you along for the ride. Along with the Motor City Madman, it is Ted Nugent himself. Ted, how are you?
I'm doing so good at stupid, Joe. Happy barbecue season to you.
Right back at you, boss. What a great background. This might be the best interview I've done as far as well, of course, because you're a rock and roll superstar, too, but the background is amazing. I love that.
Let me explain my background. I'm the only guy that kills my own background. These are animals that the Nugent family harvested for all their sacred protein, and I've got a bunch of artifacts from the Fred Bear hunting camps. So we're in a Michigan cabin in a sacred swamp, so my attitude is primo right now, and I'm all yours.
We have never, ever had a background before where the interviewee had actually killed the background. I love that. All right, I've got to talk to you because obviously, huge news going on this week. We had the shooting of Republicans who were practicing for a charity baseball game, and you did a monumental Facebook Live yesterday or the day before where you talked about gun ownership and so on in the Second Amendment. Before we get to that, though, let's start with where we are as far as rhetoric goes. And I know that you've made some statements about purposely making a change yourself, and I want to get into that. But if we just very quickly just pick a few of them. You've got Snoop Dogg shooting the president in a music video. You've got Kathy Griffin holding up a head in effigy, bloody, severed head of our president of the United States. Madonna wants to blow the White House up. You've got Caesar, in the park, in Central Park, where they're killing the president. Ted, we've gotten to a point right now to where nut jobs will see that, nut jobs will hear that, and nut jobs will say, hey, guess what? It's okay for it to be open season on one political party. So tell me how you got to where you are and what's the change that you're going to be making.
Well, it's a long story, and I'll try to synopsize for your wonderful radio show here. I was born in Detroit in 1948, and I didn't get here by being a cute sweetheart. I got here by being a street-fighting man, that I stood up for what I believe in a world of hippies and dopers and scumbags that would make fun of me because I do all the perfect things like hunt and believe in self-defense and stand up for the National Rifle Association. They've been threatening to kill me and my family. I say they. The MoveOn.org and Huffington Post and Southern Poverty Law Center. This is the umbrella that they attack me from under. And they've literally threatened to murder, decapitate, and dismember my family members because I, quote, murdered defenseless animals, not to be confused with sushi, of course.
Right.
So the rhetoric from that side, I've always shook my head, but being a Detroit street fighter, I've never condoned violence. I've never participated in violence. I've never suggested violence, just the opposite. I was in Detroit during the '67 riots, and I was a voice of calm and reason in the downtown area, especially since all my heroes were the black Motown artists. And I was really torn as a teenager that I didn't understand why people would become violent like that. So I've always been on the side of peace and love through strength and the statistics that support what I believe in.
Right. So
here we are in 2017. We certainly have reached critical mass. I do not blame any of the outrageous hate from the left as responsible for the shooter at the Republican ball game.
Agreed.
That was solely the responsibility and accountability of the man pulling the trigger. He was just demonic to be able to do that. However, you're absolutely correct in your articulation that we've reached critical mass, and when a liberal Democrat comedian like Kathy Griffin holds up a severed head in a time frame where the ISIS and Taliban are decapitating innocent people, it resonates much more true than a random comedy routine.
Yeah, right.
And here's the horror. I don't think Kathy Griffin believes in killing the president, but that was an unambiguous imagery that said, I am supporting the severing of the head of the president of the United States. It wasn't funny. It isn't comedy. I hang around in the 70s, with Richard Pryor and Sam Kinison and Rodney Dangerfield. I know humor, and that ain't it. And I'll get to the chase today, where I realized that even though my rhetoric on stage during the tsunami of adrenaline, when a time when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama et al. Were trying to ban the Second Amendment. Right. So on stage with my props as an honoring of the military, it was called, the tour was about paying tribute to the military, I had sandbags and I had a lot of weaponry on stage.
Yeah.
Even though in California at the time they were airsoft guns, they were legal.
Right.
And I would hold it up and I say, so you want to ban guns, huh? Well, hey, you might want to suck on my machine gun in a wild, outrageous rock and roll moment. Nobody on the planet thinks that Ted Nugent wants anybody's lips anywhere near my machine gun.
Right.
It was a metaphor of outrage. So taking that into consideration, even though I never suggested hurting, harming, much less murdering anybody, the Secret Service actually concluded that on their own.
Right.
I decided that I will not go into that harsh street fighting language anymore. I'm literally going to take a deep breath when I get in some of these wild and elevated, escalating debates, and I'm not going to reference anything that could be misconstrued. I'm not going to abandon my passion or my fire or my adamancy, but I am going to reach out to everyone on both sides of the aisle. No violence, hurt no one. And now that we see that someone misjudged and shot Republicans at a ball game, liberal Democrats, do what I'm doing. Reach out to all your liberal Democrat friends and tell them no more burning down buildings, no more tipping over police cars, no more severed heads, and no more enacting the stabbing death of the president.
Well, what I find, Ted, I want to interject this because you just bring up so many good points, and I just want to jump on it if I can. You know, and I know that probably won't work. Now, you doing what you're doing will be helpful, I think, and I appreciate it. I know that you can continue doing what you've been doing because, again, I never took you as truly wishing violence upon Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, and you know that the left never really thought you were advocating that either, but it was easy to pick the biggest star and hang their argument on you. So let me ask you this. Do you really think that people in Baltimore that rioted because of Freddie Gray really would not have burnt down the CVS if Ted Nugent doesn't say Barack Obama suck on this? I mean, do you really think that's going to make for a change? I know that that's your hope, but do you think it'll work?
I think I'm an eternal optimist, Joe. You know me. I'm getting ready for the greatest tour of my life. I know that the audiences are going to just dance like wild animals to the greatest rhythm and blues and rock and roll. I'm a very, very happy, fulfilled, positive, loving, giving American family.
Right.
That being said, my hope of hopes is that someone, somewhere on the left, in fact, Joe, I'm going to get back with you shortly, because I've got 3 emails yesterday from identified. I'm a hardcore liberal Democrat, Uncle Ted. I've always loved your music, and I can't tell you how much I thank you for making the statement that you, as one of the street fighters on the right, will no longer use that kind of rhetoric. And I am the writer said, all 3 writers said they're going to encourage their friends to back it down too and quit being so nasty. Because I don't think there's been self-policing on the left. There has been on the right. The right has never burned down a building or showed a severed head or enacted the murder of a president. That's strictly the territory of the left and the Democrats and the liberals. But I have seen those that consider themselves moderate Democrats, which I don't know what the hell that means, but at least they identify on a tiptoe side of the left aisle, and they've reached out to me thanking me, and they're going to pursue this dialogue with their fellow liberal friends. So
I'm going to interject here, and we're going to pick the interview up in when we come back from the break. If we get too far into the weeds, we're going to get too far past where we can jump in comfortably. You're listening to Ted Nugent. He is the Motor City Madman, TedNugent.com, and he's decided that he no longer is going to have the same sort of violent-sounding rhetoric that he's done in the past, for the simple reason that it seems like some people can't handle it. But he's also challenging the other side to do the same thing. And it's interesting, when I asked him, do you really think it's going to stop somebody from burning down the CVS? And his answer was no. But it might stop somebody else from being so vitriolic, and it might stop somebody else on the other side, or even on the right side, to have a better understanding. Look, you can disagree on stuff, but it doesn't have to be such an amplified level. And again, you're seeing all this stuff on the left with Snoop Dogg and Kathy Griffin and Shakespeare in the Park and all this stuff. that it just isn't adding anything helpful to the conversation. We continue with Ted when we come back. There's a lot more time to get to, so we'll have plenty of time for your phone calls. We also talked to him about that epic rant he did on Facebook yesterday about guns and owning guns after the shooting in Alexandria. So we'll continue when we come back right here on the Joe Pag Show. Stay here. Radio stations across the land, iHeartRadio, JoePags.com, Newsmax TV as well. Glad to have you along for the ride. Right smack dab in the middle of my interview with the guy whose guitar playing you hear right now on Love Grenade. That's Ted Nugent, the Motor City Madman. He's also at TedNugent.com. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He is a columnist. Go and read his columns. Go follow him on Facebook and Twitter. We're talking about the idea that he's changing his rhetoric because we need to be more civil and more, humane in this day and age, because people are falling off the deep end, especially on the left. I mean, obviously, it's the lefties that are doing these things. But Ted said, look, it could be speed of the leader. They're going to point at me as somebody to call the standard. We can certainly pay more attention to the standard. My question was, are you hearing from people? Do you really think the left will change? And he just started telling us about how some on the left actually emailed him. So let's pick it up from there.
And they've reached out to me, thanking me, and they're going to pursue this dialogue with their fellow liberal friends. Yeah. So I do have hope. No, will it stop dirt bags from violence and burning down cities? No, they came and protested my concerts thanks to the Huffington Post and George Soros and Southern Poverty Law Center, busting a bunch of American Communist Party members who tried to destroy my concerts. My concerts went on anyhow because my fans destroyed dirt bags in a rhetorical way. They didn't hurt anybody, but they broke through the protest lines. We had the greatest concert. In fact, I think the concert was even greater because dirt bags were protesting it, which made Stranglehold that much more of a love song. So I do have hope that it will trickle into the left. I did a great interview with Ebony, the young gal from Fox's Specialist, next to Eric.
She's doing radio in the morning in New York now, too, right?
And she fancies herself a liberal. I'm not buying it for a minute, but I think she toes that liberal line, whether it's to have creds with her liberal Democrat friends, but she makes sense so often. And we had a perfect dialogue of civility, genuine sincerity and passion, not necessarily agreeing on everything, but without a harsh word. It can be done.
Well, Ted, I want to ask you this, and it's TedNugent.com. Go there, read his articles, get his music, go find out where the concert tour is going. Go follow him on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, whatever else. You're going to want to hook up with Ted Nugent on social media because he's relevant, and just about every day he's making more news. I want to ask you this, because there are some people who are hardcore Ted Nugent fans, like me, but I don't feel this way. I'm gonna tell you how some of them feel, who go to the concerts, understand the metaphors that you're using, understand the rhetoric is part of a rock and roll show, and are going to be disappointed that you're going to ratchet it down. They're going to go, no, Ted, don't let them tell you who you can be. Is it that you're doing it because you are, in fact, the guy they always point to when they want to say, well, look at the right's doing? Or are you doing it because you've got such a huge footprint, and I think it might be this one, you've got such a huge footprint that you really do believe that you've already affected change, and it just happened like yesterday?
Well, I get to train with Navy SEALs and Delta Force, and that's all about situational awareness. Mm-hmm. So all of the above enters my decision-making process. But ultimately, I've made this decision because I feel in my heart it's the right thing to do. It's an upgrade in communication. I promise you this, when I do my 60 concerts in 2017 all summer, there will be no indication of backing down Jack Squat. And I don't know if you know Jack Squat, but he's quite a feisty young
he's
fellow.
A good guy.
But I won't use language. I won't tell anybody to suck on my machine guns anymore.
I got you.
No, that was simply a street fighting rhetorical metaphor saying you're not going to ban my guns.
Right.
But I'm going to do it in a different way. And instead of calling President Barack Obama a subhuman mongrel, I'm just going to identify what a dishonest, constitutional oath violating guy he was.
Right.
Because that is more impacting, I think, than using some of the street slang. So I'm not going to only work harder to fight for my constitutional American dream beliefs, but I'm going to fight smarter.
Hey, Ted, we're already like 12 minutes in, and you know that you and I can talk for 7 hours. So I want to get to the other topic very quickly, and I'm going to hopefully just riff on this, which is something that you're great at. I'm going to throw it out there, and if you can, for my audience, for my television, for my radio audience, sort of encapsulate what you did on your Facebook Live yesterday. I hope people will go to your Facebook page and go check it out themselves. But after the shooting in Alexandria, you became very impassioned when you heard that some of these lawmakers said they ran in the dugout, ducked their heads, and they were literally sitting ducks. And that really sparked a bit of rage and empowerment in you, because you want people to do what you do every day and what I do every day, and that's carry our sidearm. We carry our gun knowing that if, God forbid, and I've never shot anybody, but God forbid if I had to, I'd protect my family, myself, and my stuff. Please, if you can, elaborate on what you said yesterday in Facebook Live when you saw how helpless members of our Congress were.
Unarmed and helpless is an irresponsible, suicidal decision. It's a choice. Let me repeat that. Study Luby's cafeteria. Study Sandy Hook, Columbine, Aurora, Colorado. Study the Republican ball game yesterday, the day before. Are you kidding me? I get up every morning and I kiss my wife. I make a nice cup of Nugent Java. I hug my Labrador retrievers, and I get dressed. And every day since I was 17 years old, Joe, I have a large handkerchief. I have a wallet with my identification. For the last 33 years, I have my sheriff credentials and my shield. I have my cell phone fully charged. Wow, what an idea. I have a small pocket flashlight, an old Victorian-knocked pocket knife, like a Boy Scout knife. I have a Gerber belt tool with the pliers on it, and I use all this stuff every day. I have guitar picks. I have my reading glasses and a chapstick. I have a lighter for just in case I got stranded in the woods one time back in the 60s, and I vowed I would never be without a lighter.
Right.
In case I had to start a survival fire. And I put a firearm on my belt and 4 or 5 magazines every day of my life. And in each of my vehicles, I have a spare tire and a fire extinguisher. I've never needed any of them, but I know that the occurrence could possibly and likely take place where I would need these basic independent tools. And when I see my fellow Americans, and here's the most heartbreaking of all, Joe, members of the Republican Congress who dove into the dugout and hid from the shooter, some of them were U.S. Marine warriors. Yeah. And they've fallen for the jive that the Second Amendment has some kind of limitation, that I'm not allowed to defend myself here and I don't need a gun there. Well, I got to tell you, if you really believe in rugged individualism, if you believe that you have a responsibility to protect your precious gift of life from God and the lives of your loved ones and innocents, why the resistance to carry a simple tool that is very simple to learn how to use? And let me also destroy the nonsense that, well, we need trained professionals that can handle firearms. Right. I can give you 1,000 examples where people who have never fired their gun saved their lives because they knew which end the bullet came out of, and they knew who the bad guy was. It's not rocket science. Even the author of Wango Tango knows when to shoot and when not to shoot. And so Ted, my point is, it upset me.
Well, the fact is this. Had there not been Capitol Police because Scalise is in leadership, you might have had 50 dead Americans on that baseball field that day.
Luby's cafeteria. When I heard that all those 24 dead Texans back in Killeen, Texas, years ago, were unarmed and helpless because the law forbid them to bring their guns into a place where you eat. Who comes up with this? Yeah. You've got to be just brain dead to think there's some kind of safe area from evil and from recidivism and from dirt bags like the shooter at the ballpark. Yeah. I'm telling you, a gun is a simple tool. And here's a most important one. If you don't want one, don't have one. Right. But I know for a fact, Joe, in San Bernardino, within 100 yards of that slaughter, were dozens of brave Americans that would have had a gun on their person if they were allowed to. Right. They weren't allowed to defend innocence, and the innocents died.
So well said. And Ted, I was hoping that you would relay that to my listeners and to my viewers, because when I watched it, I spread it around to my local DA, I spread it around to law enforcement officers, and they're all in alignment with you and me. I mean, people who are law enforcement aren't the ones that don't want us to protect ourselves. In fact, law enforcement wants good, honest, American, law-abiding citizens to carry, because, Ted, the fact is, we are the first reactors. Those guys are first responders, but that's way too late. We have to react when something happens, and nobody wants it to happen on a baseball field where a charity game is having a practice. But the fact is, they weren't able to react. I mean, the Capitol Police were, and they stopped the bloodshed. But I mean, the fact is, without those cops there, you'd have a lot of dead Americans, and that makes you crazy, because there are still lawmakers that'll look at that case and say, this is why we need gun control, and it's nuts.
And Joe Pags, on your wonderful, effervescent, truth, logic, and common sense radio get down here as I Skype along with you. Let me tell everybody, and they should write this down, because you won't hear it in any of the media. Every day in America, many people, every day, 365 for as long as I've been alive.
Yeah.
Good people in America stop death and mayhem with their firearms. Look at what happened just now in, I think, Tennessee or Kentucky,
right,
where law-abiding citizens took their guns and stopped these fleeing, escaped felons. And the state troopers are going, thank God for we the people who had a Second Amendment that could hold these dangerous murderers at gunpoint. You can't hold them at rake point. You can't hold them at baseball point. You got to hold them at gunpoint. And the entrenched propaganda ministry infested you can't make sense of the fear of firearms by so many people. Yeah. I would reach out to my representatives in Congress. Don't you think your life is worth protecting? Why don't you carry a gun? And now is the time, because in D.C. you're not allowed to defend yourself. In Washington, D.C., are you kidding me?
It's nuts.
Well, as a cop, I've been a sheriff deputy for 33 years. And as a law enforcement who I've got to qualify every year, I carry a gun everywhere.
Yeah.
I carry a gun everywhere because I have a date with Mrs. Nugent. And if you attempt to interfere with it, you will lose.
It's Ted Nugent, tednugent.com. Go read his columns. Of course, get his music. I've loved Ted Nugent and his music since the 70s, and you're going to continue to rock on for well into the future here, Ted. And next time you're in town, we've got to get together. I can't wait to go see the next show. And thank you for putting the truth and knowledge out there every single time we get to hook up. Thanks, man.
Well, thanks, Joe. And if people would come to my Facebook, they'll see where tens of millions of people share self-evident truth, logic, and common sense. Godspeed.
We'll send them there. Thanks for taking the time, Ted. We're back after this on the Joe Pags Show. Stay right here.